Welcome to the Elokus podcast, and we are now, this is going to be class number 13 in the first discourse, Bsha'ah Hegdimu 5672, class number 13. All the classes of the first discourse were dedicated for the Refuah Sheleimo for Avraham Ben Parvin. May he have a complete recovery amongst all the ill of Israel and blessings for the entire family. A good thing, just to remind everyone, if anybody wants to sponsor one of these episodes, classes for the merit of something, a miracle or anything you need in your life, or to thank Hashem for something, or for a birthday, anniversary, memory of someone, your site, you can see the information on the podcast itself. And on the bottom over there, you can send us the information that you would like. Thank you. Now, we are picking up. I'm sorry I didn't give a class yesterday. I was just traveling, didn't get to it. And I'm trying to do 5 a week, but this week I think we'll only have 4. Bezrat Hashem, we shall catch up. Maybe next week 6, with God's help. Okay, so we were talking about in the last class, in class number 12, how the relationship between an Or Pnimi, an internal light, with the Keli, with the vessel. Internal lights are meant to go into vessels, and therefore there is a great symbiosis between the vessel and the energy, how they two interact with each other, and one of them affects the other. In the beginning, we learned how the vessel affects the Or, that the vessel takes the light and brings it into its realm, so that the energy should function, however, through the lens or through in the world of the vessel. In the world of the vessels. What does that mean? That if a person, for example, has an energy, if we have an energy of sight, when we are experiencing our sight in a body, the sight is not spiritual sight, but physical sight. That means the vessel imparts its self and its state of existence onto the energy. And when the soul lives, he doesn't bring this example, but we can say the soul in heaven lives pure spiritual life. When it comes into a body, its spiritual life translates in the body, through the body, into physical life. And so it is with everything. So that's the vessel playing on the energy, but it also works the other way. The energy, of course, uplifts the vessel and refines the vessels. So the vessels are not just remaining coarse vessels, and through them a spiritual program is working. The vessel and the light get married to each other. A husband and a wife that get married to each other, which, by the way, in many places it's explained that the woman is the vessel and the husband is the energy. When the two get married to each other, inevitably, obviously, the longer they're married and the more intertwined they become, which means the more their marriage is of harmony, the more they rub off on each other, in which they become more like each other. And in many ways, you can see that in your own marriage, in your own life, if you're married. And so it is with the Or. Since the vessel, we learned, is a keli, is a vessel, so it's open and it invites the light to permeate it. So the light is able to then reveal itself in the vessel, and thereby it, number one, we learned very strongly, it dominates the vessel, it controls the vessels. The vessels are completely subservient to the energy, like we see, for example, with our powers of our soul. When they go into the body, they completely dominate that organ and limb. That the organ and the limb become completely subservient to its energy that's in it. And the reason why it's able to do so is not like the dominion of willpower, of desire. The power of will dominates the body and all the organs and all the limbs. However, it dominates in a form of control. It controls it from above. It kind of compels the limbs to follow the dictates of the will. Not so when we're talking about over here, Or Pnimi. Or Pnimi are the individual powers of the soul. How they dominate over the limbs is in a manner of closeness. They refine and elevate the limbs to become. And the reason for that is because they can fully open up they can reveal themselves. Sometimes you have a certain program, that a certain file you want to read on your phone, and it says your phone will give you, or your computer will give you a message. You don't have a program, or you don't have the right vessel. You have to upgrade your computer. You have to upgrade your system. You have to introduce a whole new thing, which through that you can open up this file. So, which means that in order to open up a certain energy, there has to be the compatible keli, the compatible vessel. And the way the orpnimi is that the vessels, the limbs, and if we're saying it's the limbs of the body, remember that concept of energy and vessel is going to exist on many, 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 many levels, of multitudes and multitudes. You really say infinite levels, higher and higher and higher. But in its most concrete physical form, it's the energy of the soul and the powers of the soul as they transmit and as they communicate with their corresponding vessels, like the vision, the power of vision with the physical eyes, the power of hearing with the physical ears, the power of understanding and intelligence with the physical mind, physical brain. So the way it interacts is that the vessel is a vessel. It's appropriate. It's tailored. Its chemistry is meant to facilitate the spiritual power, and thereby the spiritual power can comfortably reveal itself. And since it reveals itself, it's able to uplift the vessel. And he gave 4 examples of the way an energy in the body reveals itself in the body, and it doesn't dominate from the outside, it uplifts from the inside. So number 1, he said, the way a higher power, one koach, an orpnimi, and higher orpnimi. I'm just reviewing a little bit the last points of the last class so that we can summarize it. There are 4 ideas that he brought out in this idea where a higher power can reveal itself either in a vessel or in a lower power. So, for example, he brought when the intelligence controls the power of movement, that it should become intelligent movement. It does so where the koyach haseichel takes control over the koyach hatnua, the koyach of movement, but it doesn't do so by speaking down to it, by compelling it from the outside, but rather the koyach haseichel, at least a ray of it, a ha'ara of it, a radiant, an external element of it, is manifesting and reveals itself in the koach hatnua. And by doing that, it refines the power of movement to become more refined and receptive, and therefore intelligent, even though movement on its own lacks intelligence, but now it becomes intelligent movement. It has been refined. Another example that he gives for that is the way the moach rules over the heart. The mind rules over the heart. Our emotions are very, very immature naturally. The mind comes and adds maturity to the emotions. How does it do so? It educates the emotions. The emotions, as we grow older, become more refined, more directed towards things that are deserve our emotions. That's called the intelligence of the emotions, where the emotions become intelligent. They're not just brute, coarse emotions, but they're more refined emotions, more human emotions. Unlike when we're very small and we're children, we have very immature emotions. So the way it works is that the moach, the mind, doesn't control the heart by dominating it, where the heart has nothing to do with it. The emotions receive the input from the mind because the mind reveals itself in the heart. As he explains, the lave is makabel chayos, since the heart receives its energy from the mind. So some of the intelligence flows into the heart, into the space of the emotions. And as a result of that, the emotions become, the first thing is interesting, he says, is that it weakens the emotions. Because when the emotions are very, 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 very intense, they don't yield, they're not vulnerable for direction. It's like a wild horse. Sometimes you go horseback riding not that I go horseback riding that many times, but when I've gone, I've seen some times where they take one horse and they take it out from the thing and say, this horse has been acting up the last day or two or the last week. They're not ready, unless you're a really good rider, you can ride even on this horse. But generally the horse has let the manager, the rider, the ones in charge over there, the cowboys or cowgirls, whatever they are, let them know that they're not they're now being very, very horsey, and they're not going to accept any rider to ride on them. So the same is with the emotions. When the emotions are in their full peak, you can't control them. So what happens, however, is when the intelligence, the more a person focuses in on intelligent thinking and introduces more knowledge into their experience, it causes a certain weakening of the emotions. The more objective a person becomes in general, that's what intelligence is objectivity, the less subjective they become. It weakens the subjectivity of the heart. And then in the state of weakening, it can then redirect the heart and elevate the heart, that the emotions themselves become intelligent emotions. So that is not a dominion from the outside, but it's like I gave the example of a helium balloon, where it lifts it up from the inside. It's not like picking up the balloon from a force from the outside, but from the inside, it elevates it. Now we continue further, and the fourth example that he gave, and then he quickly, was the second one. The third one, he says in a half a line, the dominion of the powers on the limbs in general, the way that each power dominates its limb is through a way of revelation. It reveals itself in the limb. That's how it controls the limb. That's a very, very small little half a sentence that he said. And finally, he uses the last one, the general godly soul reveals itself in our animal soul. Generally, a person naturally, as we learn in Tanya, if we don't get deep in our lives, but we stay surface level, we live the life of our animal self. We have two souls, one godly soul, one animal soul. The animal soul is animalistic. The godly soul enters into our animal, and generally it says that this happens when there's a certain level of maturity. To a certain degree, it happens as soon as we're born. But we don't really have the means to open up our godly soul, because our godly soul primarily seat, as we learn in Tanya, is in the intelligence. So as long as a person doesn't have an ability to activate the holy intelligence, which is until they're 13, 14, until they're 12 or 13, boy or a girl, at that age, after they reach that teenage age, we begin to develop already a higher mind. And then we're able to open up our godly soul by learning more about holiness, godliness, and getting a deeper purpose in life. And what that does is it curbs and it minimizes and it affects our animal, that the animal hopefully becomes less. And as we discussed last class, hopefully this is something that happens to us through our life, that we don't become more animalistic if we spend time deepening our appreciation by opening our godly soul more and more. And that's what Chassidus is supposed to do. In general, Torah is holy, it's godly. So it enables the godly side of the person to flourish, Torah in general. But when you're learning in Torah, specifically when you're learning Chassidus, a higher Torah, deeper Torah, it's the language of the godly soul, you open up your godly soul to a greater degree. And when the godly soul opens up and expresses itself and reveals itself within the space of the animal soul, because one is enclosed in the other, it starts making the animal soul a little bit into a mensch. That means the intense heat of the animal soul, its obsession with things, get a little bit weaker. And slowly but surely, the more we activate our godly soul, the more the animal soul itself joins into the experiences of the neshama. It can start enjoying godly things and participating and finding meaning in a more higher directed life. And as we discussed last week, obviously, if a person davens, spends time on actually muscling their godly soul, flexing the muscles of their godly soul through prayer, then this experience is expedited. It happens much faster. However, if you don't do it, then it will still happen, because if you stay at it and you don't stop learning Chassidus, you will see eventually you start becoming more of an elevated human being, a deeper person, a person that seeks more significance and deeper meaning in everything. You can't live anymore in the superficial animal world. So that's the way it dominates, is not by forcing it, but by educating it and elevating it. Sorry, we spent 15 minutes to review. Now we shall continue further. The calls and all of this is on again, we're going to conclude today, second chapter. I hope so. And this is all because the limbs and kelim re'uyim, the limbs of the person are appropriate vessels to the light of the tzura of the nefesh, of the form of the soul. In other words, Hashem made a physical body to match the soul. Al kain, it's for this reason, hakoichos mizgalim, the koichos, the powers of the neshama are able to reveal themselves, upayalim behem, and they're able to affect the limbs. And now he adds, now, since the way the neshama, the soul, the spirit, will dominate over the matter is through it being internalized and revealing itself in that limb. So therefore, depending on how the chemistry of the limb is, so will the power reveal itself. And this is going a little bit back to what we said all the way in the beginning of today's class, which is a review of what we said in the beginning of this chapter, is that the limbs, because the soul invests itself into the limbs, because the oiros go into the kelim, it's for that reason that the kelim bring these powers into the physical state. Remember we said that? It translates the powers into its world. Now he's going to say that it has that it's not just in general. See, earlier I spoke very in general. Is that our power of vision, when it goes into a physical eye, becomes physical. The power of hearing becomes, but now it becomes also physical audio, not spiritual hearings, spiritual sounds. But now he's going to say that it's even the particular types of people that there are, with the nuances of people's form of their nature, is very much related to the nature of their limbs. That the nature, the chemistry of the body has a lot to say on the character of the soul. And therefore, in accordance to the nature of the chemistry of the limbs, so the powers will reveal themselves. Like we know that according to the substance of the Maayon over here means the brain, literally. The physical substance of a person's brain, he is galus or seichel. To that degree, and in such a manner, the light of the seichel, the light of the intelligence will reveal itself. If the chemistry of the brain is very dry, and very hot, sometimes the nature of you pick up the material. It can be anything, Sometimes you're making kugel, and you can see on the chemistry of the potato. My wife tells me a lot. This is a good potato. It will make a good kugel. Sometimes it's a clumsy potato. It doesn't have, and it's not good for potato kugel. It might be good for something else. So the same is the nature of the brain, of the chemistry of the brain. If it's very dry and hot, not good. It's going to affect that even though the person has a soul with a power of intelligence, they're just not going to have the right vessel to be able, and the person will not be too of an intelligent person. The momezek karvelach, or if it's too cold and wet, biyoser, too much, gamke lotov. It's not either good. Ach b'mezek mumutza, if it's the right mezek, it's the right combination. It's measured out perfectly. Being karvelach, between cold and wet, v'cham v'yovish, or hot and dry. That means it has to be a little bit of both. In general, it says in Chassidus that the right side of the brain needs to be, in order for it to be the vessel for the experiences of the right side of the mind, which is Chachma, it has to be more wet and coolish. The left side of the brain, which is the analytical side of the brain, that requires that side of the brain should be hot and dry. But in general, there has to be a good chemistry to the brain. Now, if it's a little bit tilting to one side or the other side, then the person's kalim are not so good, and that's why you have people that have less. They're not so prone to intelligence. They're good at other things, but their minds, and obviously Hashem didn't create them for that purpose, that they should be the greatest intellectuals. The world needs other people that can do other things, right? A lot of times it's dependent on how well this chemistry is, the physical mach. Certain families we know that they are very genius children, and it's a whole lineage because they're made up of good brain stock. So they'll be geniuses. They can have other faults, but at least this aspect is more. They have a more. So it's not only the powers of the soul; it has a lot to do with the chemistry of the body. For example, I'm going to share with you. It says in the There is a whole letter from the Ramban where the Ramban talks about the right state where a person has to be in order to have intimacy when you want to create a child. So the Ramban talks a lot, and I forgot the name of the Ramban Sefer regarding this, where the Ramban talks about Nachmanides talks about how important it is that the parent should be in a state where you don't have intimacy on a full stomach. This is obviously in the time when the person can become when they can become pregnant, when the woman is ovulating, when you're expecting a pregnancy, or so you want to bring children into the world. Be very careful, because when a person eats a lot, then the blood is thick, and therefore the zera, the seed that will create the child, is going to be of a thicker, and therefore it's not going to create simply the physical body that's going to be produced is not going to be of a refined nature. So therefore, you have all these. The Ramban goes through a whole list of things that a person should be careful. So you want to invest the best in your children to give them the best chance that they should have good mochen, good physical vessels. In accordance to how well the brain, the physical substance of the brain is. In Bahaskala, if the person is going to have the ability to be able to have deep understand things deeply, or sometimes people are not as deep, but they're very thorough. They have the ability to understand things in a very wide way. In other words, everything they understand, they can apply to a bunch of scenarios. Maybe not as deep as somebody who's got the depth of it, but not that much the ability of expansion. Some people can understand very refined ideas, very sharp ideas. People with a more refined brain, material of the brain, and it will change the nature. It seems like within the nature of a good head itself, there are people that are incredibly sharp and fast, and the people are more thorough and slow. It has a lot to do also with the physical vessels. Now, the same will also be the power of vision that's in the eye. In accordance to the chemistry of the eye, in its blackness and the white. Every eye is different. Every person's eye is different. So it will come the light of the vision, Ruchni is the spiritual vision, as it will translate into the physical eye. Now he says something really, really amazing. And as it is known, the gam in Yintoivayin, even the idea of a person having a good eye, and a bad eye. We hear when he says a good eye and a bad eye, he does not mean physical vision, that if you need glasses or not. What he means over here, a good eye and a bad eye, means that we say that the Pirkei Avos, it says that the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told the students, go seek what is a good midah that a person should always pursue, and what's a bad thing that a person should go away. And one of the sages, I think it was Rabbi Eliezer, said that a person should try to always have a good eye and run away from a bad eye. Good eye means to be able to look at people. Simple meaning of it is to be able to look at people and in Yiddish, say farginen. You have no problem when people have good. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't create envy and jealousy. You like to see people succeeding. A bad eye is people that can't stand people when they succeed and when they have it good. So it's interesting. You would think it's a character. It's a soul character. It's an emotional. It's the state of their soul. It says no. A lot of it also is related to the physical chemistry of the eye. Tali b'mezigas chaymer ein agashmi is dependent on the chemistry of the chaymer, of the substance of the physical eye. If there's a lot of blood, or less blood, as stated elsewhere. I didn't look up this source, but he obviously in that place, the makom acher. He explains it in the new ayin base, which I'm not using right now. It has Maamor Makaimis. It has notes on the bottom where it probably will explain where this is explained. I'm not using it. I use it at home, but I haven't used it over here when I'm giving the class. So it will be maybe tomorrow. I'm going to look up where this is, so you can check it out and get more information about the eye, the nature of a person's physical eye that will produce their eyes. He says in general, this is in the parentheses here, in accordance to how the blood and the water are mixed in the limbs of the body. Adam, Aleph Dam. The word Adam, a human, is called Adam, which means Aleph Dam, You can break it into two words. The aleph, dam of the blood. The main person is the blood. So the blood is very important, the nature of that blood, and the aleph. Now it's interesting, he doesn't say that aleph over here is water, but could be aleph is related to water. So the mixture of the aleph, and the dam and the blood, according to this, this will create the proper vessel for the blend of the person's spiritual powers. Very simple. This we can see. There are some people that are very impatient. They snap at every little thing. They get immediately very angry. People that way. So you can see that they obviously have a lot of blood in them. Oishu Shaket, like it says about Esav, he triggered, everything triggered him immediately, and he would go. Right? And we don't have to go an extreme case like Esav, but Esav was very red. Oishu Shaket, there are people that are very watery, they're very calm. It takes a lot to get them angry. I'm just reading today in the Gemara about Hillel, how he would say, the guy couldn't get him angry, even in the most vulnerable time, right before Shabbos, when a person is most prone to get upset because you're rushing, and so the guy asked him the most ridiculous question, and Hillel remained calm. So obviously he worked on himself, but also it has to do with certain chemistry of the body. It has to do with the blend of the blood and the water in the physical body. Now it's possible that a person that has a lot of blood, but they're a very good blend. Their water is blended in well. For example, we have another person that was called Red, but he was the most beautiful, balanced person, and that's King David. David HaMelech was red, but he had beautiful eyes. So which means that not always is the redness just the problem. Esav was red, and he was a maniac. He was a monster. And there's possible to have an increased blood, but if it's balanced correctly, it could be well. And of course, obviously, this doesn't take away free choice. A person can work on themselves. But we're talking about there is a certain natural state which is related to the physical limbs. And even though the powers in the limbs don't have any comparison one to the other, the powers are spiritual. And the limbs are physical. This is so far apart. So therefore, why would one affect the other? Nevertheless, since they clothe themselves in them, so according to the chemistry of the vessels, so will be the chemistry and the balance of the powers. We have to say, so since the two of them are compatible with each other, and according to the vessel will come the light, so therefore we would have to say, according to the vessel itself, the nature of the limbs, which is similar to the nature of the substance of the spiritual light, the nefesh of the soul, which through this, they are appropriate vessels to receive the form of the soul, the spirit of the soul. Just like we spoke in general, the fact that the physical vessel of the eye is very, very glossy and very clean and very transparent and windowy, and therefore light can pass through it. Like everything that is clean, makabel or receives light, everything that is glossy or translucent, transparent. The same is the substance of the brain, and its wetness. There's a certain moisture to the brain. Has something of the nature of the spiritual. In other words, the physical characteristics are similar to the spiritual powers. We shall, Be'ezus Hashem, just chew over this point, Be'ezus Hashem, tomorrow. Everyone, let's see Mashiach today.